The cherry blossoms were still falling when Rodri grabbed him. 150 guests, armed men at every exit, a church worth more than most people's lives, and a 15-year-old boy in dirty sneakers and a torn hoodie sprinted down the center aisle, knocked over a champagne tower that shattered like a gunshot, grabbed Young-Yi Seo, the most feared Korean crime lord on the East Coast, by his pristine white tuxedo lapel, and screamed 4 words that made the entire room go cold. "She is your sister." Young froze. Nikki froze. Every gun in the room clicked at once. And Rodri, chest heaving, bleeding from a cut above his eye, tears and sweat mixing on his 14-year-old face, looked at the most beautiful and most dangerous man he had ever seen and said it again, quieter this time, so only Young could hear. "Nikki is your sister, boss, and I have the proof." The cherry blossoms kept falling outside the stained glass windows, soft and unbothered, as if the world hadn't just ended. Title card, 3 days earlier. Day -3, Thursday 11:47 p.m. The alley behind the Golden Dragon restaurant smelled like fish sauce and cigarettes, which was exactly the kind of place Rodri Washington had been told by his mother, his teacher, his pastor, and basic common sense, never to be in after dark. He was in it anyway. Not because he was brave, because he was desperate. He pressed his back against the damp brick wall and watched through a cracked window as 12 men in tailored suits sat around a round table, eating the best food he had ever smelled in his 15 years of poverty. At the head of the table sat Young-Yi Seo. Rodri had never seen him in person before. He'd only seen the photographs his mother kept hidden in the false bottom of her old Bible, photographs she refused to explain, with a man's name written on the back in shaking handwriting. Young-Yi Seo. The photographs were 30 years old. The man in them looked nothing like Young. But the dragon tattoo on his neck was identical. Rodri's hands trembled as he held up the photo from his hoodie pocket and compared it to the man through the glass. The dragon's tail curved the same way. The scales were the same pattern. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a brand. A family brand. Rodri had done enough reading in the last 72 hours to understand what that meant in Korean organized crime. He hadn't slept in 3 days. It had started with a funeral invitation. Thursday, 3 days earlier, 9:00 a.m. His grandmother, Miss Esther Washington, had died on a Tuesday. She was 81 years old, sharp as a tack until her last breath, and she had left behind 3 things. A house Rodri's mother couldn't afford the taxes on, a photo album the size of a dictionary, and a sealed envelope addressed to the boy who looks like his grandfather. That was Rodri. His mother, Carla, had tried to take the envelope. His grandmother's lawyer, a nervous little man named Mr. Pack, had firmly refused. The will was specific. The envelope went to Rodri alone, to be opened on the day of the funeral in private. Carla Washington hadn't spoken to Mr. Pack since. Rodri opened it alone in the funeral home bathroom, sitting on the closed lid of a toilet, while his extended family argued about casserole dishes in the chapel next door. Inside was a letter, a photograph, and a DNA test result from 4 years ago. He read the letter 3 times before he understood it. His grandmother had written it in her careful, looping cursive, the kind old black women developed in segregation-era schools, where penmanship was one of the few dignities they were allowed. "Baby, your mother doesn't know this, and I pray she never has to. But I am old and the truth has weight, and I cannot carry it into heaven with me. Your Aunt Nikki, your mother's younger sister, who your mother raised like a daughter after your grandfather passed, is not a Washington by blood. She never was. I found her on my doorstep in a cardboard box when she was 4 days old. There was a note. I kept the note. It is taped to the back of the photograph. I had the DNA test done when Nikki was 17. I did it because of the tattoo. The man in the photograph had the same mark. God forgive me for waiting this long. Your grandmother. Esther." Rodri flipped the photograph. A Korean man, 30 years younger than the photos in his mother's Bible, but unmistakably related to them. broad shoulders, angular jaw, the dragon tattoo, smaller and fresher, coiling up a younger neck. And on the back, in different handwriting, rushed, terrified, feminine. Her name is Nari. Her father is Hanyi Seo. Please keep her safe. They will kill her if they find her. I am already dead. Rodri sat in that bathroom for 45 minutes. When he came out, his eyes were dry. He had already made a decision. Thursday afternoon. The decision was stupid, and he knew it. But Nikki was getting married on Saturday. His Aunt Nikki, 20 years old, light brown skin, laugh like church bells, the kind of beautiful that made strangers stop mid-sentence, was marrying a man named Youngie Seo in 48 hours. She had been dating him for 8 months. She thought he was a successful businessman. She thought she was in love. Rodri had spent the next 12 hours on his phone, in the school library, in the public library, in his bedroom under the covers, reading everything he could find about the Seo crime family. What he found made his stomach drop floor by floor, like an elevator with its cables cut. Hanyi Seo, Young's father, had been one of the most powerful Korean crime lords of the 1990s. He had died in a gang war in 2001, when Young was 5 years old. But before he died, he had fathered at least 2 known children. Young was the eldest. The second child was a girl, born to a Korean woman named Park Jae-yeon, who had tried to flee the organization with the baby. Park Jae-yeon had been found dead 3 weeks after the baby disappeared. The baby was never found. Until now. The baby was Nikki. And in 36 hours, Nikki was going to marry her own brother. Friday, 2 days before. Rodri made his first mistake at 7 a.m. He called the police. He sat in the precinct for 4 hours. He showed them the letter, the photograph, the DNA results. He explained everything. The desk sergeant listened patiently, took notes, offered him a juice box, and disappeared into a back room. 20 minutes later, 2 men in plain clothes came out who were not police officers. Rodri knew they weren't police officers because real police officers didn't have the same dragon tattoo on the inside of their left wrists. He ran. He ran out the front door of the precinct, down 3 blocks, into a bodega, out the back, through a schoolyard, and didn't stop until he was crouching behind a dumpster 6 blocks away with his heart trying to escape through his ribcage. The Seo organization was inside the police department. Of course it was. He sat behind that dumpster for 20 minutes, breathing hard, rethinking everything. Then he pulled out his phone and called the only person he trusted completely. Rodri, his mother's voice, worried before he even spoke. Mom, he swallowed. I can't tell you everything right now, but I need you to keep Nikki home today. Don't let her go to any wedding appointments. Tell her anything. Silence. What did you find in that envelope? Carla's voice had dropped to something low and careful. Mom. Rodri Jerome Washington. What was in that envelope? He closed his eyes. Something that means Nikki can never marry young Seo. Another silence, longer this time. And then his mother said something that cracked the whole case wide open and turned Rodri's plan to ash. Baby, I already know who young Seo is, and that's exactly why I've been trying to get Nikki to marry him. The dumpster smelled like rotting cabbage and motor oil. Rodri didn't move. He pressed the phone harder against his ear, certain he had misheard, certain the last 72 hours of no sleep had finally cracked something important inside his brain. Mom, his voice came out smaller than he intended. Say that again. Carla Washington took a long breath, the kind of breath that carries years inside it. Come home, baby. Come home and I'll explain everything. No, he stood up, legs shaking. Explain it right now. On the phone. Right now, Mom, because I just ran out of a police station because 2 of young Seo's men were sitting inside it wearing badges, and you just told me you want Nikki to marry him. And I have a letter from Grandma Esther saying Nikki is his sister. So whatever you're about to say it fast, because I am standing behind a dumpster, and I am 15 years old, and I am terrified. The silence that followed was the longest of his life. Then Carla said, Esther wasn't supposed to do a DNA test. Everything tilted. "You knew," Rodri whispered. "You knew Nikki wasn't a Washington." "I knew she wasn't mine by blood." Carla's voice fractured at the edges. "I raised her. I chose her. That makes her mine. That has always made her mine." "Mom." "But the CO family came to me 8 months ago." Her voice dropped so low Rodri had to press the phone against his skull to hear it. "They came to me and they said they'd found Han Yi's daughter. They said they'd been looking for 30 years. They said if we cooperated, if Nikki married young, the family would be protected. The house, the debts, everything. They said it was the only way to bring her home safely." Rodri's jaw tightened. "They said she'd be safe by marrying her own brother." "They don't know, Rodri." Her voice broke completely now. "That's what I'm telling you. The CO family doesn't know she's Han Yi's daughter. They think she's just a girl Young fell in love with. The arrangement isn't forced. Young genuinely doesn't know. Only the elders know who Nikki really is, and they are using this marriage to bring Han Yi's bloodline back inside the family quietly, back under their control, without ever telling Young or Nikki the truth." The world rearranged itself around Rodri like furniture, moved in the dark. They weren't planning a wedding. They were planning a trap. Nikki wasn't being welcomed home. She was being caged, locked permanently into the CO organization through a marriage that could never be undone, because if it ever unraveled, both she and Young would be destroyed by the revelation. That was the leverage. That was the chain. "Mom," Rodri's voice was very calm now, the way water gets calm right before it freezes. "Where is Nikki right now?" "She's at the hotel. The CO family put her up for the weekend before the—" "Which hotel?" "Rodri, don't you dare." "Which hotel, Mom?" A pause. "The Grand Meridian, room 1407. But there are men outside her door, baby. There are always men outside her door. She thinks there's security for the wedding. She doesn't know there." He was already moving. Friday night, 36 hours before the wedding. The Grand Meridian was 40 blocks away, and Rodri had $4 and a broken Metro card. He ran the first 10 blocks, caught a bus for the next 20, walked the last 10 with his hood up and his grandmother's envelope pressed flat against his chest inside his hoodie like a second heartbeat. The lobby of the Grand Meridian was marble and gold, and the kind of clean that made Rodri feel like a stain. 2 men in dark suits stood near the elevator banks, not looking at anything in particular, which meant they were looking at everything. He counted 3 cameras, 1 blind spot near the service entrance behind the concierge desk. He had watched enough crime documentaries with his grandmother to know that hotels always had service elevators. It took him 11 minutes, a borrowed busboy jacket from a laundry cart, and a confidence he did not actually feel to get to the 14th floor. Room 1407. 2 men outside the door, exactly like his mother said. He stood at the end of the corridor and thought for 30 seconds. Then he walked back to the stairwell, found the fire alarm on the wall, and looked at it for a long moment. "Sorry, Grandma," he whispered. He pulled it. The chaos was immediate and magnificent. Doors flew open. Guests poured into the hallway in robes and irritation. The 2 men outside 1407 looked at each other, looked at the flood of confused hotel guests, and made the professional decision to stay at their post rather than join the evacuation. Which meant Rodri couldn't get to the door. He was rethinking everything from inside the stairwell when the door to 1407 opened anyway, because Nikki Washington had apparently decided that fire alarms were not suggestions. She stepped into the hallway in a silk robe, her light brown skin warm under the emergency lighting, her natural hair wrapped in a satin bonnet, looking annoyed and beautiful, and so completely unaware of what was about to destroy her world. She looked directly at the stairwell door. Rodri waved frantically through the small glass window. Nikki squinted. Then her eyes went wide. She said something to the guards. Rodri could read her lips. "I need to check on my nephew," and walked toward the stairwell with the casual authority of a woman who had never once in her life been told she wasn't allowed somewhere. The door swung open. "Rodri Jerome Washington." She stared at him. Why are you in a busboy jacket, and why does your face look like that, and why did you pull the fire alarm in my hotel? How do you know I? Because I know you. She grabbed his face with both hands and examined the cut above his eye. Who hit you? I fell. From what? A moving car. Nikki. He pulled her hands down and held them, looked at her. His Aunt Nikki, who had taught him to ride a bike and helped him pass 7th grade math and danced with him at every family cookout since he could remember. I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not scream. Her face changed. The sharpness behind her eyes, the thing that had always made her different, the thing Rodri now understood was Hanyi Sio's blood running clean and clear, surfaced like a blade. Tell me, she said. He told her everything. She didn't scream. She sat on the cold stairwell steps and read the letter and the DNA results 3 times. She looked at the photograph for a very long time. She turned it over and read the note on the back. Her name is Nari. Her father is Hanyi Sio. I am already dead, and her hand went very still. Then she said, my mother's name was Park Jayon. Rodri stared. You knew. I always remembered something. Her voice was far away. A sound, a woman humming, a smell like jasmine. I was 4 days old, so it doesn't make sense that I'd remember, but she stopped. What are you supposed to remember from 4 days old? Maybe she held you for a long time before she left you, Rodri said quietly. Nikki looked at him. Her eyes were dry, and that was somehow worse than tears. He doesn't know, she said. Young doesn't know. No. So he's not. She stopped again, started again. He genuinely loves me. Nikki. That's the cruelest part. She stood up abruptly, squared her shoulders, and in that moment she looked so much like the photographs of Hanyi Sio that Rodri's breath caught in his chest. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Saturday, wedding day, 8 hours before. They had a plan. It was not a good plan, but it was the only one they had. Nikki would go through with the morning preparations, hair, makeup, dress, while Rodri worked on getting the DNA evidence authenticated and in front of Young before the ceremony. Not the police, not the elders, Young himself. Because if Young knew the truth before the ceremony, he would stop it. Rodri was certain of this, and he couldn't fully explain why. He had never met Young Yi Seo. He only knew what the internet said, which was mostly terrible. But something in the story his mother had told, Young genuinely doesn't know, Young genuinely loves her, made him believe that the man had a line he wouldn't cross. Nobody loved someone, and then chose to destroy them. At least, Rodri hoped that was true. He spent the next 4 hours making copies, photographing documents, emailing files to 3 different accounts. He had a contact, a girl named Priya from his school, whose mother was a DNA specialist at a hospital, who confirmed via text at 10 a.m. that the test documents were legitimate and verifiable. He tried to get to Young's hotel room at 11 a.m. He was caught. Not by the guards, by a man he had never seen before. Older, white-haired, the kind of still that predators have. He was sitting in the lobby of Young's hotel like he had been waiting, specifically for Rodri. He was one of the elders. He knew about the envelope. He smiled at Rodri with the patience of someone who had been arranging the world for 40 years, and found it very easy. The boy from the funeral, he said in perfect English. You've been very busy. Rodri ran for the 2nd time in 2 days. This time, they caught him at the corner. Wedding day, 1 hour before. They didn't hurt him. That was the part that scared him most. They sat him in a car, clean, black, expensive, and a man explained politely that the wedding was proceeding, that Rodri was going to attend as a guest with his mother and behave appropriately, and that after the ceremony everyone would go home and live their lives and certain documents would become irrelevant because legally and spiritually the matter would be closed. And if I don't? Rodri asked. The man smiled the same ageless smile as the elder in the lobby. There's a house on Decatur Street with unpaid taxes, he said, and a woman inside it who raised 2 girls on nothing but love and stubbornness. It would be a shame. They were threatening his mother. Rodri sat very still for the rest of the car ride. He thought about his grandmother's cursive. The truth has weight, and I cannot carry it into heaven with me. He thought about Nikki's face in the stairwell. That's the cruelest part. He genuinely loves me. He thought about a Korean woman named Park Jae-yeon who hummed to her daughter for 4 days and then put her in a cardboard box to save her life, and then died anyway. By the time the car stopped outside the church, Rodri had made a new decision. He was going to do it anyway. He had the documents folded against his chest. He had Priya's confirmation screenshot on his phone. He had his grandmother's letter, which was maybe the most important thing, because if young Seo was the kind of man who could read that letter and still go through with it, then Rodri was wrong about him, and he needed to know that too. The cherry blossoms were falling as he walked through the church doors. He could see the aisle, the guests, the men with guns stationed at every exit. He could see Nikki at the back, breathtaking in white, her light brown skin luminous, her eyes terrified in a way only Rodri could see because he knew what was behind them. He could see Young at the altar, 30 years old and beautiful in a way that felt almost unfair. Angular jaw, broad shoulders, the dragon tattoo coiling above his white collar, looking at Nikki like she was the only real thing in the room. Rodri's chest cracked open. He walked to the side of the aisle, counted his steps to the front, calculated the distance, looked at the armed men, looked at the elder seated in the front row who had already spotted him and was very slowly reaching into his jacket. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke. Young and Nikki faced each other. And Rodri ran. The champagne tower shattered. Every gun rose. Young's hand, the hand that had been reaching for Nikki's, closed instead around Rodri's wrist with a grip like a steel cable. He could have broken Rodri in half. He didn't. He looked at this 15-year-old boy bleeding above his eye, standing in the ruins of his wedding, and said nothing for 5 seconds that lasted 100 years. Then he said very quietly, "Show me." Rodri pressed the papers against Young's chest. Young read. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of cherry blossoms brushing the stained glass and Nikki's breathing, and the rustle of a letter written by an 81-year-old woman who couldn't carry the truth into heaven. Young's face did not collapse, it did not rage, it simply closed, like a door, like a vault. He looked up, past Rodri, past Nikki, directly at the white-haired elder in the front row. And the elder, for the first time in 40 years of arranging the world, looked afraid. Young Seo reached into his tuxedo jacket. Everyone in the room stopped breathing. He placed his phone on Rodri's palm. Unlocked. One number already pulled up on the screen, a number Rodri didn't recognize with a Seoul area code. "Call that number," Young said. His voice was glass. "Tell them Young Yi says it's time to open the second file." "What's the second file?" Rodri whispered. Young looked at him for a long moment. The dragon on his neck seemed to move. "The file," Young said slowly. "That proves I am not Han Yi-seo's son either." The church erupted. And somewhere in the chaos, the white-haired elder stood up and smiled. Like he had been waiting for exactly this moment. Like the real game had not yet begun.